This is Jeff.
Hey.
This is Jeff's bush.
Hey.
Jeff's bush is not attractive.
Hey, Susie. Looking sweaty today.
You.
Oh, yeah, you wish!
Looks like this wingman needs his feathers clipped. You see, confidence begins below the waist. And doesn't Jeff know that when you trim your hedges, the tree stands taller?
Hey, neighbor. You trimming your bush or a grizzly bear back here?
Good question, Keith. Hey, you signed those divorce papers yet?
Moment of truth! That monster looks about as precise as a rusty butter knife. So Jeff will need the steady hand of a neurosurgeon to... Understandable reaction, fellas. This waking nightmare happens every day and could have been avoided with the right tool for the job. Introducing the Lawnmower 2.0 from Manscaped, a precision-engineered personal trimmer for an unruly bush. And more importantly, what's underneath it?
How am I not passed out yet?
Its skin-safe technology means you won't nick or snag your most delicate spots. And a 6,000 RPM motor makes short work of even the leafiest shrubbery. But don't let the name fool you. This lawnmower's so quiet, it's received the National Librarian Association's Quietest Men's Personal Trimmer Award 97 years in a row. Its ceramic blade module may be state-of-the-art, but let's be reasonable. Nothing lasts forever.
Yeah, especially Keith's marriage.
That's why the brilliant minds at Manscaped made it replaceable. This prevents the buildup of bacteria, and honestly, makes the thing flippin' immortal. Oh, did we mention it's waterproof? Because it's waterproof. So go on, guys. Mow when it's wet. Mow when it's dry. Mow on a red-eye flight to Mesopotamia. Manscaped has every bush covered, even Jeff's.
Hey, Keith. You're strong, man. You'll get through this.
Thanks, Jeff's bush.
The Lawnmower 2.0 from Manscaped. Click now to have the world's best personal trimmer delivered right to your door and get a free toiletry bag with your order.
And that is www.manscaped.com.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
This is one of the greatest and wildest podcasts on the planet, and you're listening to the Punisher's Batcave. Enter to the dragon's dungeon if you dare.
Alright, welcome to the Punisher's Batcave podcast, ladies and gentlemen, with our hosts Charlie and Chris. me being the main host and Chris being the co-host of the show, and he's also managing the productions. So, today, there's a lot to talk. I mean, there's a lot on our mind to talk about. So today's going to be different. I think it's going to be a special episode because it's going to be all in one. Basically, what that means is that we're going to cover a lot of topics in one episode. We're going to talk about, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Tegan Knox for winning the number 1 contender elimination match at the NXT, the American Grad Bash. What is it called? The Great American Bash? Yeah. A huge shout out to her for winning. Props to her. Anyways, going back on topic. Yeah. We have a lot to discuss today. Because we have a lot of topics to talk about. Basically, it's like 3 or 4 topics. Basically. So, the first topic, what we're going to talk about is the Chris Negy situation at UCF. The second topic is going to be about Cobra Kai. It's big news going to Netflix. Yeah. Basically, they cut ties with YouTube Premium, and now they're going to Netflix. Then the third topic is going to be about the next-gen video game consoles in the video game world for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, and our thoughts on it. And then for the last, maybe the last topic, we'll talk about the Logan Paul. Did you watch that episode with Logan Paul when he was crying that America's racist? Let's talk about that. And another thing I would like to talk about is, wrestling. So, yeah. First and foremost, let's start off with, I think we should start with the Chris Negy situation at UCF. Yeah. And how this whole Black Lives Matter movement is basically becoming a trend because of what he's been saying. So, let's get everything started. Okay. Let me pull up the information that I found on Chris Negy. What's his name? Chris Negy? No, Charles Negy. My mistake. His name's Charles Negy, and he's a professor at UCF. I keep saying Chris Negy. Alright, so... Wait, let me look it through Instagram because I've been getting a lot of followers this week, which is good. I think it's Mackenzie Milton that has it. Okay. Alright, so let's pull up the information we have on Charles Negy. He's a professor at UCF. And let's read his tweets because I want to dissect them and go over them. Wait, let me write what we're going to talk about down. Because I forgot to write it down. Okay, we're going to talk about... Oh, wow. Pen's out of ink. Alright, the next thing... Let's write it down because I get forgetful. Logan Paul. And what else? Wrestling. Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with the Charles Negy UCF situation. Okay, I'm going to read a few tweets that he's written, and we're going to dissect it and go over it. Basically over things that he said, that people are protesting and claiming at UCF that they're claiming that is racist that he said, or sexist. There was a tweet that went out by yesterday by Greg McCrae, where he says that Charles Negy is a racist and a sexist professor who is currently employed by my university. I do not condone comments and tweets that he has made openly disgracing others because of their race or gender. Hashtag UCF fire him. Okay, so he's joining this protesting movement at UCF by UCF students. And is being held by UCF students. I find this kind of embarrassing because UCF has always been my dream university to go to, and I applied there because I was planning on going there, but plans have changed because they put me on a wait list for housing. So, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's see what Charles Negy said that was quote-unquote racist or sexist, because I'm going to go on a limb here and say I don't think what he's saying is necessarily... I think what he's saying is stereotypical and a big hasty generalization based on a bias that he has towards the African American community and making a big, like a major stereotype. But I don't think it's extremely racist, because here in a tweet he says, sincere question, if African Americans as a group had the same behavioral profile as Asian Americans on average. Okay, so he's talking about etiquette and well-mannerism. Performing the best academically. He's talking about basically African Americans having a high or low IQ? Yeah. And then he says having the highest income, which is I'm going to say it's true because there are African Americans that do have a high income. You look at athletes, you look at celebrities, you look at any other public figure out there that's African American that makes a lot of money. Of course, they're going to have the highest income compared to those that have a medium income, that come from a middle class household. And then you got those that are in poverty that are at a low stricken level of a low income base. So I think and then he goes on by saying committing the lowest crime. Well, I think that's half true because there are African Americans that have committed the lowest crime rates when it's targeted towards Hispanics or white on black violence in general, or black on white violence in general, because the highest percentage that I saw in an article, it said that there's a lot of black on black violence, which is true as well. And then he goes on by saying, would we still be proclaiming systemic racism exists? Okay, so in that tweet, let's talk about everything that we just talked about. I mean, there are African Americans that do have a high IQ, and there are African Americans that have a low IQ, and there's African Americans that have an average IQ. I mean, to say that African Americans don't perform best academically is kind of biased, and it's a big generalization because not all African Americans are stupid. I mean, there's African Americans that do well on SAT scores before they apply to a certain college their freshman year that are high school educated. So there are African Americans that do perform the best academically. I don't think what he's saying is right because, I mean, if it's racist what he's saying, then yeah, okay, maybe you have a point. But I don't think it's that racist. Because I think it's stereotypical. I think it's a bias. I think it's biased. I think it's a generalization he's making. Because to say that, African Americans should be just like Asian Americans who have a high behavioral profile, I mean, there are Americans that do have that. African Americans that do have that. I don't know where he gets his sources. I honestly don't know what his political views. I think he's like right center or far right. I'm not sure. But he has raised an awareness of... I remember reading a tweet he wrote where he talks about African privilege. Well, we'll get that into that later, because let's talk about the systemic racism issue, because systemic racism, I feel like when leftists say it, it must be true. It must exist. Well, if it's true and if it doesn't exist, then explain the video that was published on YouTube by Act.tv, where it explains, about systemic racism, and Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro came out and debunked that video piece by piece brilliantly. Why systemic racism does not really exist. I mean, it used to. Maybe it used to exist, but it doesn't exist in this current state in America in 2020. Maybe in the 1960s and 1940s it existed. During the Jim Crow laws and the segregationist movement by the KKK and the far right. But right now, we don't have systemic racism systemic racist issue. I think it's a income inequality issue based on different multiracial backgrounds. Because there are, for example, let's take Hispanics. There are Hispanics that do have a low poverty rate, that are on a low income basis. There are Hispanics that are in a middle income, what's it called? Middle income family. Yeah, that come from a middle income family. And there are Hispanics that have a higher income, that are celebrities or public figures. For example, take a YouTuber. They make about, $300,000 in income. Even white people, even the same logic could be applied to white people and African American people. So to say that systemic racism is real because of how much you make, it's not true. Charlie Kirk even said it. It's not true. Even Ben Shapiro has said it. It's not true. So I'm going to go out and say it's not true either, because of the claims I'm making about systemic racism based on income, racial income, when it's actually income inequality of different races that go through this situation. Another thing that I'm going to debunk about systemic racism in this tweet by Charles Negy is that I think what he's saying is that when he says, would we still be proclaiming systemic racism exists? I think what he's trying to say, it might be true to liberals, but in reality, it's not true to us, right-wingers. So, I think that's what he's saying. I'm not saying it in my words. I'm not saying it as us. I'm saying it in his words. So, I mean, I personally don't think it's real. Systemic racism? I mean, it probably used to be a real thing back then. During the Jim Crow laws and the segregational era during the KKK and which later on led to the Reconstruction era and all that stuff. So, going back to that tweet, I honestly think it's biased, it's prejudiced, it's stereotypical as well. I mean, to say that African Americans don't perform well academically and that they don't have the same behavioral profile as Asian Americans is not true. Because there's well-mannered and well-educated African Americans, for example, that voted for Obama or voted for Trump. There's also African Americans that do perform very well on SAT scores. In their junior or senior year before they apply to their dream college. I mean, I'm a white Hispanic, for example. Let's take me for example. I did very well on the SATs. I got like an 1140 total, but I came up short on some requirements. When I think the SAT requirement score for UCF, because I remember applying to UCF as one of my dream colleges. I also applied to UF, I also applied to UM, I also applied to basically every university in the state of Florida. Even FIU, even some colleges out of state. I was thinking about applying, but it wasn't worth it because tuition would cost way more out of state if I applied out of state. So luckily, I started applying for universities within the state I was born in. So going back to this post, also saying committing the lowest crime. Like I said, the white on black violence is the lowest crime rate in the U.S. But the black on black violence has certainly gone higher, and there's an article that proves it that I read from I think a government website. Let me pull it up. It's a pretty long. Let me find it. Basically, what it says in that article. Okay, I think I have it here. I have one here. I have this one. Okay, I think there was another article that I read, but it's not government based. I think it's better to search it as crime rates based on race. Okay. Here you have. I think this is a better article. I remember reading an article on it, but I may change my mind because sometimes the numbers can be different when you look at different mainstream news outlets or alternative media outlets. The numbers could be different, so we got to narrow it down to who has the right answer. So we're going to look at charts and statistics from the government. For example, wait, is this the article? Oh, wait. Well, this is a good article. It's by the UCR.FBI.gov website. There's two that I found. One from 2017 and one from 2016, where it explains the total ratio of... Wow. Of people based on different races that have committed crimes based on murder, non-elegant manslaughter, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, arson, violent crime, property crime, other assaults, and so on and so on and so on, etc. So forth. Now, oh shit, did I press the wrong button? Okay, I did. It shows here the total amount of the population of white people, and I'll put. It's a really long-winded article, and there's actually 3 or maybe more long-winded articles to go over. On the podcast. I don't want to bore anybody, our audience, with it. or our listeners or viewers. So I'm going to post these articles on, I think, on our social media accounts, so people can have a look at it under this episode, because it's too much information to go over, and maybe this will change some people's minds. And these are very interesting numbers, because it shows here that I'm just going to skim, not necessarily skim through it. I'm just going to give you a general consensus of it instead of just saying too many numbers. So we're just going to cut to the chase of it and talk about it. For example, we're going to look now at the 2016 Crime in the United States article. It shows here race of offender, sex of offender, ethnicity of offender, and it turns out that white people, out of the whole population in the United States, commit the most crime of race as an offender. Black or African American commit lower than whites and lower than other races. So wait, am I reading that wrong? Hold on. Yeah, this one's more confusing, but I think the one from 2017 makes more sense to talk about, because it's got, it talks about murder, non-negligent manslaughter, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, you name it. So, the total of the whole population based on every race is basically around 8 million, over 8 million people. So that means that 5 million, over 5 million percentage of the people that are white commit the most crimes than black or African Americans, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian or Hispanic. Wait, is there a scroll bar, because this cuts off? What? Yeah, this article's cut off. You don't get to see the whole diagram of the numbers. And this article was published by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. So numbers really don't lie, unless they're warped, like that little girl from TikTok talking to her mom and parents about how they're racist and bigoted and this and that. Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know why it cuts off. But here it says Hispanic Latinos, a total of 1,190 something. It cuts off there. I mean, I'll show you the article, but you would have to download probably the file to look at it. I mean, I would download it and talk about it, but I'll just leave it for the viewers to look at the article, download the article yourselves. You'll look at the numbers. It turns out, yeah, I mean, you look at the mass murders that are going around. A total of, white people have a total of 5 million, over 5 million white people, a total of black or African American that are 2 million, over 2 million, and then you have Alaskan Indian or Alaskan Native that are about 196 somewhat thousand, and then you have Asian, 97,049 of the population. You look at the types of crimes they've done. Murder, it turns out that African Americans have done more murder than white people, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian or any other race combined, because it says here, for example, for murder, that a population, about 2 million of the black or African American population that commits the crimes of murder is about 5,025 African Americans that have committed that crime. Because we're talking about, black people because of this whole Black Lives Matter movement and all this situation. When it comes to rape, African Americans have committed 5,182 of that crime. When it comes to robbery, 40,024 of the African American people in the community have committed that crime. The list can go on and on. I mean, yeah, there's certain things that African Americans have done, but the numbers are, I mean, there's different types of crimes that they have done that are lower or higher than other races. If that doesn't make that much sense, I mean, just look at the article yourself. We'll post it on our social media platform, and we also created a YouTube account, so we'll upload that on the YouTube video probably, and it'll be on the description below. But yeah, this is a really interesting article to read and look at. Well, it's not really an article. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that it's more of a statistical data based on Pew Research by the FBI from 2017 and 2016. So just look at it yourselves. And there's also another article from the U.S. Department of Justice, or Office Justice based on the Office Justice programs. When you look at the Bureau of Justice Statistics Special Report, there's an article titled Black Victims of Violent Crime by Erica Harrell, who has a PhD in BJS, who is a BJS statistician. Blacks were victims of an estimated 805,000 non-fatal violent crimes of about 8,000 homicides in 2005, yada, 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 yada. Okay. I've read the article, but I'm not going to bore you guys about this article. So these are 3 articles, or sources, let's just call them sources, that are based on government findings. And there's also going to be another article we're going to attach that is published by channel4.com titled Do Black Americans Commit More Crime? I'm just going to read a quote from this article and save you just all the information you need. And the quote says, "It's important to note that black men commit nearly half of all the murders in this country, which is astounding when you take into consideration the fact that they only make up 12 or 13% of the population." So, that being said, it's obvious that the African American community is a part of one of the biggest minority groups in the U.S. So, hold on, let me see something, because it logged me out of, I think, Instagram when I was looking at the tweet. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Greg McCrae did tweet that, and I'm just gonna correct him. It's stereotypical what he's saying. It's a generalization what he's saying. It's a bias based on his own bias. It's not technically a racist thing that he's saying. It's just stereotypical. Let's just call it what it is. Stereotypical. It's a generalizational bias. And then he writes in another tweet that Mackenzie Milton reposted on his Insta story, that the subgroup of blacks has lots of problems, many likely missing fathers, having dysfunctional, uneducated mothers, which I'm going to say is not true, because not all African Americans come from dysfunctional families. Maybe there are some, but not all of them. And to say that they come from all uneducated mothers, I mean, let's just continue reading. Having dysfunctional, uneducated mothers surrounded by peers with sociopathic tendencies. Lots of obstacles in life. No one knows what the solution is to this complete situation. Okay. Again, not all African Americans come from a dysfunctional family, and where they hang out with sociopathic friends. I mean, maybe there is a faction of them that do that, but not all of them. It's just, I mean, it's biased to say that, and it's a big generalization that he's making. And then he goes on by saying uneducated mothers. I mean, there's African American children that come from single parent families or divorced families, or maybe a family that has a marriage between a man and the husband and wife, that do have educated mothers. I mean, the whole point I'm trying to say is that there are African American mothers who are educated, that teach their children right from wrong. Are there mothers that are uneducated? I don't know. I'm not at liberty to say that because I don't know. Because let me see if you can Google that. I don't think it's true because they do educate their children right from wrong, and when you look at it philosophically based on morals and intelligent, relevant thinking, I think what he's saying is foolish because, and not really racist. I mean, foolish, stereotypical, bias, and making a generalization. So that's what I think Charles Negy is saying. Okay, so wow, there's a lot of sources here. When I typed in African American mothers uneducated. Okay, so I don't really want to use Wikipedia because Wikipedia is not always that reliable. But here on Wikipedia it says well, it's a lot to read. Maybe I'll put it also on our YouTube channel. Maybe you guys can have and social media platform. Maybe you guys can also have a look at this article on Wikipedia, but yeah, it's a lot to read and go over in an episode because we have other topics to talk about. Yeah, we'll just post this on our social media platform under this episode, and on probably YouTube as well. I just don't want YouTube to delete this video because I don't want to come across as like, you know, because with YouTube censoring things these days and banning videos that they don't agree with, I mean, it's stupid at this point what YouTube is doing because, yeah. Okay, so looking at the numbers here in this article, I mean, you guys can have a look at it. So yeah, going back to the tweets he was saying, Charles Negy, that Mackenzie Milton reposted on his Insta stories. I mean, having the highest income, committing the lowest crime, this stuff that he's saying, doesn't necessarily... Okay. Wait, we already covered this tweet. Yeah, he's just trying to... I think what he's trying to do, dude, is, when he's talking about issues like that, he's bringing up an awareness that, and a claim that to prove that systemic racism doesn't really exist. I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, but he's saying that first he says that, and then he talks about the subgroup of blacks has lots of problems. Many likely missing fathers, having dysfunctional, uneducated mothers, surrounded by peers with sociopathic tendencies. Lots of obstacles in life. No one knows what the solution is to this complicated situation. I mean, when he wrote that tweet, I'm just going to say it, that not all African Americans do that. I mean, and not all African American mothers are uneducated. There's African American mothers that have had a education, have had a high school and college level education that teach their children, that educate their children, not just from right or wrong, but also educating their children on things that are things that are being taught in school and things that are not being taught in school. But yeah, looking at these articles, I think they're reliable. I'll just post the Wikipedia one, even though I don't always consider Wikipedia that reliable. I think this article's interesting to give a look at. But there's a lot of sources you can look up yourselves, and for anybody who's listening, our audience or viewers watching, I suggest that if you're going to look for other articles, just type in on Google, are African Americans uneducated, or you could just write crime rates based on race or ethnicity. And I'm pretty sure these articles that I have will pop up on the search engine, but I'm going to just put it up on social media and post it on YouTube, and you guys can have a look at it. Now, there's other tweets that Charles Negy writes on his Twitter and account, and I wanted to go over these tweets. He writes in one tweet, he actually wrote today something, and he said, when the government and public feel the need to mandate intellectual diversity on college campus, that's the clearest sign that U.S. universities have become pseudo-liberal indoctrination camps. Well, I think what he's saying there is true, because most public universities, and you'll agree with me on this, Chris, are basically liberal. And I think it's illiberal to silence conservatives with a different point of view. It's illiberal. So, I mean, there was also an article I remember reading once that was published by, I think, UCF Nightly News, that a certain demographic of Republicans wanted Ben Shapiro to come to UCF to speak to host an event and speak to the students there, and they didn't have enough they didn't want the funds to host the event, if that makes sense. Yeah, it kind of makes sense of what you mean. So, I mean, I remember reading that article, and I was like wowed by it. I mean, that UCF should let right-wingers talk in college campuses, even though left-wingers may not agree with them on various issues. And this is a perfectly good example that, I mean, in the article that I'm talking about with Ben Shapiro, being allowed to speak on college campuses like UCF or UF or any other Florida university, which I think they should allow him to speak, and hold an event there. I think it is illiberal to ban them from walking on college campuses and hosting these events. When I think a faction, for example, you look at UCF, I think there's a faction of students that are Republicans that voted for Trump or that agree with Ben Shapiro on various issues and can learn from other things from Ben Shapiro. And in that article that I read from the UCF Nightly News, I think it's called, they didn't want the funds to cover it, but they wanted him just freely come at his own free will to UCF and just host an event and have a debate or have a discussion with the students to talk about things they could learn or things they could agree on. And, I mean, I don't think it's... Here's how it works when you get a political expert to come to a college campus to speak to students. You need to have funds. You need to have money to hold that event. That's how it works. You got to raise money to have that, to make that awareness. Now, going back to the Charles Negy situation and the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening, here's another tweet he wrote. Which is the tweet that he wrote? Let's just look at the tweets I highlighted that he posted about weeks ago. He wrote one tweet where he says, "Seems the number of people who hate America but enjoy living here has reached a critical mass. Totally deranged people." Basically, he's talking about the protesters and looters that are rioting over George Floyd's death. Which, yeah, he may have a point. Here's another tweet that I don't know if I should agree with. I don't know if I should agree with or not. He says, "Here's a suggestion to those who think they are being screwed and oppressed in the U.S. Stay in school, be the best student possible, avoid crime, avoid gangs, avoid unwanted pregnancy, avoid drugs and alcohol. Amazing what a little common sense can do for your destiny." Now, I have mixed feelings about that because I do agree with the last parts of his tweet. But in the beginning, he says that there's people that feel they're being screwed or oppressed in the U.S. I mean, who's oppressing who and who's screwing who? That's what I want to know. I want to know if he's talking about the African American community, because I don't know if that's what he's talking about. Then in another tweet he goes, "The good thing about the riots, MSM stopped telling us 24/7 that we're all going to die from COVID-19. The riots must have eradicated the virus." Yeah, I think this guy is completely right-wing. I mean, our podcast, I mean, we would consider ourselves libertarian and right-wing. I mean, we're conservatives with a liberal streak. Or in other words, considered conservatarian. So he makes some good points, but there's some tweets that I don't condone. Like the tweets that Mackenzie Milton reposted, I do not condone what he said there, because it is stereotypical and it's biased and prejudiced, and when he makes that generalization. And then he goes in another tweet saying, responding to C.J. Pearson, who is a young black male who used to, I think he used to be a Republican, but then changed to a Democrat and then became a Republican again, or something like that. He's this young African-American kid who used to be called and labeled an Uncle Tom for supporting the Republican Party. Here, C.J. Pearson writes, "I'm a young black male, but I'm tired of watching America burn every night. The left claims they're doing it for me, for all black people. They're not. True, because you don't speak for all black people. There's black people that are conservative, and there's black people that are complete liberal on the left side of the aisle that voted for Obama or want to vote for Biden." But what's funny is, remember that video where Biden says, "If you have a problem with me voting for me or Trump, then you ain't black"? I was like, then what are they? Chameleons? I mean, I found that remark that he made just as foolish as the tweets that Charles Negy wrote, that Mackenzie Milton highlighted in his Insta stories. So yeah, going back to that tweet that about C.J. Pearson, when C.J. Pearson wrote that, Charles Negy then responded to C.J. Pearson saying, sadly, despite all the reasonable and logical ideas expressed by this young man, the forces of wokeness, Black Lives Matter, leftist, liberal, MSM academia will cause his voice to be unheard. Well, there is a left-wing narrative that has a bias against conservative points of view. I mean, you go on Facebook, there's conservatives that are being censored. For example, there's this African-American comedian, I think by the name Terrence something, who voted for Trump, that got censored or banned, not really banned, but censored on Facebook and demonetized for highlighting some death threats that he's gotten from people who have a different point of view and different opinion from him. I mean, I don't know what to say there. I mean, I think this whole right-wing censorship has to stop because it goes against the grain of the First Amendment and freedom of speech. I mean, do private companies have the right to silence different opinions? I don't think so. I mean, yeah, they can set rules and regulations because they're a privately owned company or a publicly traded company, and they can make these rules and restrictions, but the truth is, you're still violating the First Amendment right of that person that's expressing his thoughts on the internet. But going back on topic with the Charles Negy situation, he even wrote a tweet saying, I think it's it's a Twitter tweet that he wrote with a Facebook link where he says, "I love that white liberal young lady, sarcasm. I'm so happy she exists to save us minorities. What would we do with these folks with white savior syndrome?" I'm going to click on the link and then we'll probably... Oh. The video got taken down on Facebook. It says the page isn't available. Let me log in and see if it's there or not. Now, going back to this, hold on. Did I do something right? Okay, I'm on Facebook. Let me see the video. Yeah, it's not on Facebook. The video got removed. Okay, so yeah, he's been writing a lot of these tweets and these things on Twitter. I mean, there are some points he's making that are true, and but I'm gonna have to condone those tweets that Mackenzie Milton highlighted that Charles Negy wrote. But here's a tweet that he wrote, that he put up on Twitter, Charles Negy, where he says Biden has a plan for the most radical economic overhaul since the New Deal. I'll translate. More social programs, more handouts, more incentivizing people to not accept responsibility for their own destiny. And it's an article that he posted that's by Newsweek.com called Joe Biden, the Moderate, plans the most radical overhaul of the U.S. economy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's tweets that he's been putting up that are right wing. I mean, I'm not saying I don't agree with. I just don't agree with the tweets he made about the African American community. That's the one tweet I don't agree with. but he does make some points on other issues, because I've been stalking his Twitter, and, well, I mean, it's his freedom of speech to say this stuff, write this stuff. But anyways, let's also talk about the privileges based on race, like white privilege. I mean, it's just white privilege, African privilege, Hispanic privilege. By the way, let's talk about those other types of privileges, because I don't think people even know it exists. If white privilege does exist, then so should African privilege, Hispanic privilege, and Asian privilege, and so on and so forth. Because let's look at what the definition of privilege is, shall we? Yeah. A privilege, by definition, is a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available to only a particular person or group. Okay, so let's just say that to say that white privilege exists, I mean, I mean, it's kind of foolish, because I would say it's kind of foolish because, what do white people have an advantage over? I mean, black people? White people don't have advantages over black people. I mean, not even, and is there advantages that black people have over white people? I mean, if it exists, then it must be true. But I wouldn't say it exists. Yeah. So, let me just say and go out on a limb here. A privilege is an earning. It's something that you earn. A special right, advantage, or immunity granted. Immunity granted. It's anything that's granted, basically, or something that you earned, or available only to a particular person or group. So it's something that you earn. So imagine if anybody of any kind of race earns something because it's a privilege for them to earn that. Okay, so maybe it might exist, but I just don't think white privilege exists, because when you tell somebody to check their privilege, whether it's a white person or African American or anybody else, if they've experienced racism or they experienced other things that claim that a privilege make a reason that a privilege exists is beyond me, because I don't even know how to put it in better words for you. So yeah. Looking at the Charles Negy tweets, I mean, and stalking his whole Instagram, Twitter, I mean, should he be... My question... The thing is, should he be fired? I think he should be penalized, not fired, for writing some tweets that are, I think, prejudiced and stereotypical. But fired unceremoniously and being vilified for things he's been writing... I mean, that's kind of a little harsh. That's kind of too harsh. I mean, I would just penalize him, like suspend him from teaching at the school. But firing him would be... I think it's too much. Yeah. But anyways, let's get to other topics, because we've been talking on this podcast for about 57 minutes. Let's talk about the other topics. Cobra Kai. Big news breaking. They moved to Netflix about a few days ago, but nothing seems to be up yet for Cobra Kai, because we're still waiting for Season 3. However, yesterday, since we're already right now in July 2nd, yesterday, July 1st, they put up the 3 Cobra Kai films. Not Cobra Kai, the Karate Kid films. basically the Karate Kid trilogy. And I'm gonna be honest with you. The Karate Kid and the Cobra Kai series, movies and series, moving to Netflix I think it's a good idea because it's definitely cheaper than YouTube Premium, because YouTube Premium is what, $14.99 a month, and Netflix gives you different options whenever you choose a different subscription package. You have the $9.99 a month or $7.99 a month basic package, which is cheaper, and which is the package that I have, and the wisest package that I chose. Because I want basically you save more money. You don't have to spend that much money, ridiculous amount of money on. Yeah, I agree. On just absolutely on anything that's ripping you off. So far, I like the idea of Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid going to Netflix because it's a better deal. I think it's a better deal than YouTube Red or whatever, YouTube Premium, whatever you want to call it. And I think you'll get I think they'll attract a bigger audience, and based on a different demographic fan base. And I mean, you'll attract more viewers. They'll attract more viewers. They'll write better stories, I think, on Netflix than they did on. And I'm talking about the writers and producers and directors. I think that basically the writers writing better stories than they ever did on YouTube. But it's an amazing show. Cobra Kai is a really good show. And it's this news is record breaking going to Netflix. I think it's a really good deal. What do you think, Chris? Yeah, I like the idea of it going to Netflix. I agree with you. Yeah. Okay, on to the next topic. Video games. The video gaming world. Oh. What are we going to talk about that? The PS5 and the Xbox Series X. I mean, so far I like the specs of them, the video game consoles. But the one thing that I don't like is that for the PS5 is that the specs on it, the gigabytes that they have confirmed that it's going to be is about like 800 and something gigabytes. And when you look at the Xbox Series X, they said it's going to be 1 terabyte of storage. My question is, why couldn't Sony make the PS5 have 1 terabyte just like the Xbox Series X does? I mean, it's absolutely foolish to make it lesser than the Xbox Series X. I mean, this is why when companies market their items or products, when they compete against other products, one's going to have a bigger advantage over the other. So the Xbox Series X, I think, has a slighter advantage over the PS5 because of the storage. But I really like the other specs and features that the PS5 has. It looks futuristic. It's got that futuristic look than the Xbox Series X. But I think the Xbox Series X does look somewhat futuristic. It's just like it looks like, I remember someone posted a meme of the consoles, and and someone said, "Oh, the PS5 looks like a Wi-Fi router, and the Xbox Series X looks like a refrigerator, a mini refrigerator," which I was laughing, and I found it funny when they when they posted those memes on, I think it was Facebook. Yeah, I find it funny. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I like the console. I like the specs, but there's some specs that I don't think I like about the PS5. I mean, I think they could have done better on the storage unit, because they should have made it 1 terabyte, not 800 and I think it's 825 gigabytes or 885 gigabytes, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, let's look at the article, what it says. Yeah, where's that article? Because this article doesn't have all the specs confirmed. Okay, I think this is better. Yeah, I was right. The PlayStation 5 has a custom 825 gigabyte SSD internal storage, and there is an expandable storage called the NVMe SSD slot. So, I think you could add more storage on it using that SSD slot. However, I think you could also use an external hard drive to give it a more expandable storage. But the Xbox Series X so far has 1 terabyte expansion card for expandable storage, 1 terabyte custom NVMe SSD storage, 4K UHD Blu-ray drive, 10 gigabyte at 560 gigabyte per second, and 6 gigabyte at 336 gigabytes per second. For memory bandwidth, memory RAM, the Xbox Series X has 16 gigabytes GDDR6. The Xbox Series X 12 GPU is 12 T-flops, 52 CUS at 1.825 gigahertz, custom RDNA2. And 8 times, and the CPU has an 8 times Zen 2 cores at 3.8 gigahertz, or 3.6 gigahertz with SMT. While the PS5 CPU has 8 times Zen 2 cores at 3.5 gigahertz variable frequency, and the PS5 GPU is about 10.28 T-flops with 36 CUS at 2.23 gigahertz at variable frequency. The memory on the PS5 is 16 gigabytes GDDR6 or 256 bit. The memory bandwidth on the PS5 is 448 gigabytes per second. The optical drive for the PS5 has a 4K UHD Blu-ray drive, and the internal storage is a custom 825 gigabyte SSD, and the PS5 has an expandable storage NVMe SSD slot. So, I think Xbox Series X has an advantage over the PS5 when it looks to internal storage unit, because it has 1 terabyte and the PS5 is 125. So they should have just made the PS5 have 1 terabyte as well if they want to compete with the Xbox better. I mean, that's one source by looking at the consoles. But yeah, I mean, so far I like the consoles. I just hope the price range is around $200 to $400. And I have my reasons why it should be that cheap, because I think it should be around honestly, I think it should be around $200 to $300, because $400 to $600 or $700 is too expensive, and it's going to be a major ripoff. So I hope both consoles start at the price range of $200 to $300 to make it affordable for everybody. Because I don't think anybody's going to want to pay $600 to $700 for a new console. It's a major ripoff. Yeah, it's a ripoff. So, yeah, there you have it. Moving on to the next topic, the Logan Paul Jake Paul situation. I was watching a YouTube video of Logan Paul's podcast where he claims that America is racist repeatedly. And I'm thinking, this guy has to be stupid and ignorant, because where the hell do you get that America is racist? Just because of one person's action? I mean, looking at the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement because of the George Floyd death and Ahmaud Arbery death and Breonna Taylor death. First off, I'm going to say not all cops are bad people, and there's cops that come in many different races. Yeah, that's true. I don't judge all cops based on the actions of a few, because what that cop did to George Floyd, you don't know if it's justifiably racist. You don't know what motives he got to put his knee on that African American's neck, George Floyd. You don't know what caused it. You don't know. You weren't there to even say it's racist or systematically racist, because I mean, I'm gonna just say that I do agree with police reform. I do agree with criminal justice reform, and I do agree with prison reform. But, however, I do agree with those reforms because it weeds out the bad cops, and you would hire better cops that are law-abiding people that will protect and serve the community, whether it's the African American community, the white community, or whatever community. However, my 2 cents on this is that, like I said, what did George Floyd do that this cop did that was racist? I mean, you don't know if it was you don't know if it was over racism. I mean, I remember reading an article that right-wingers are toting around saying that George Floyd put a gun to a pregnant woman's body or stomach. I don't even know if that's true or not, because I don't know what to say about that article that I read. If it's true, then it's true. If it's not, then, I mean, maybe they're making things up on that article. But, I mean, I don't agree with how that cop... handled things with George Floyd by putting his knee over his neck, because that's an illegal chokehold, by the way. There are proper ways of doing other chokeholds that any police officer could do. That's actually taught by MMA. I guess you could call them MMA instructors. Because I remember watching a video by Freestyle Fighting Academy where I think it was Marcus or David Avalen was talking about should chokeholds be banned from being used by police officers. And he talks about that a wide variety of law enforcers do use that hold. Not that hold. That do use a proper way of doing a chokehold instead of doing it the wrong way that could cause a death. But it's a very informative Instagram video that I saw on Instagram, and he does make good, valid points. And yeah, I mean, like I said, what that cop did is not justifiable. I mean, he murdered George Floyd. It's not right. But to say that all cops are bad and that they should be the police department should be defunded is it's just absolutely foolish. Yeah, and yeah, I mean I watched that YouTube video of Logan Paul, and I just stopped watching it right there when he said America was racist, and I had to just stop watching it because I couldn't take it anymore, and I had to debunk that stupid claim that he made. And another thing about the Logan Pauls and Jake Pauls of the world, don't you remember watching that video of Jake Paul looting and rioting? And he got sentenced to prison for, he got a notice for that? Yeah, I think he was put in jail for it. And they bailed him out. Yeah, I think his brother bailed him out and gave them money. The Logan Pauls and Jake Pauls of the world are fucking idiots. I mean, you're gonna friggin' loot and riot and cause these things towards businesses just because of a death of an African American that happened in this country? I mean, it's stupid. You could peacefully protest and for a good cause, but rioting and looting does not justify anything. You're just doing what Antifa does, because Antifa is a group of freaking terrorists. Like, they're domestic terrorists. Yeah. I mean, look at what Antifa's doing, defacing monuments and taking down monuments that they don't like George Washington and all these, Abraham Lincoln, what's his name? I'm just gonna call him by his last name, USL Grant or something like that. Like, I mean, tearing down even the St. Louis statue was being planned to taken down. Who was, I think, a Catholic leader? Yeah. I think it's stupid to deface a monument. So yeah, great. What? The dog barked. I swear, there's always an interruption that ruins a podcast. So yeah, going back to these issues, Logan Paul and Jake Paul are idiots. Like, I don't know how you can make Viners this fucking famous. Now, moving on to the next subject, wrestling. I really wanted to have a debate today about something that comes to my mind. Wait, how many minutes have we been on this podcast? Wow, 1 hour and 16 minutes. Let's cut it down short. I mean, maybe we could talk about this in the next episode. But it's about when people say, because when I wanted to talk about wrestling, it's about when people say wrestling is fake. I mean, you always get a debate from people from either side saying, oh, wrestling's not fake, wrestling is fake. Like, one side will say it's not fake, the other one will say it's fake. Okay. Let me debunk the ones that say wrestling is fake, because it's pretty obvious wrestling is not fake. I mean, everybody knows wrestling is scripted, predetermined. There are some fixed maneuvers, and there are other maneuvers that are real that could cause injuries. And it is also a contact sport, and that's something people should realize. It's a combat sport. Wrestling is a combat sport, but it's also under the guise of sports and entertainment, which they focus more on the entertainment aspect. Another thing that wrestling is, that I said it's scripted, I said it's predetermined, I said it's fixed, I said there are moves that can be used for real, like legitimate. I guess that's about it. But I could say other things that wrestling isn't. I mean, for certain, it's not fake. So I just want to put that debate to rest, because everybody should know it's scripted and all that stuff. Because there was an article that was published by Bloody Blue Mars that I will also provide in the link in the description below on YouTube and and also on the social media platforms. That was published by Bloody Blue Mars. I think it's titled. Hold on, let me find the article. I swear to God, there's always interruptions from the outside interferences whenever I host a freaking podcast. What happened? Outside interference. This microphone picks up all the noise, the background noises out there. You can hear people from outside. You can hear people from outside of this room talking. Seriously, like, people don't know how to fucking keep quiet or lower the freaking volume of anything they're doing. It's going to distract the freaking podcast. Wait, let me see why where do I go? Articles. Hold on, it's taking forever to load. Okay. There's an article that was published by Bloody Blue Mars. Is pro wrestling fake? And is pro wrestling a legitimate sport? I think it's a well-written article. By the way, we're not promoted or sponsored by Bloody Blue Mars. We just get paid by them because of YouTube demonetizing people over controversial opinions based on facts and truth, or controversial opinions that are based on rhetoric or things like that. That's happening with online censorship. So I think it's wise that we get paid by a company. Yeah. So yeah, we are not promoted or sponsored by them. We're just under their website because they pay us for voicing our thoughts on the internet. But yeah, like I said, this is a really well-written article. I think you should check it out. That talks about pro wrestling, and there's another article that talks about the origins and history of pro wrestling, which is another good article you guys could check out and read. That we will be posting on our social media platforms and on this episode. Hold on. Do you hear a noise? Yeah, it's outside interferences because obviously people don't know when to freaking shut up when you're hosting a podcast. Yeah, I hear background noises. Yeah, is there a way you could, like... No, there's no way around it. This Razer microphone picks up all noises. But yeah. Okay, so we have the articles. And I think we pretty much covered everything. But yeah, going back to the Charles Negy situation, like I said, I don't condone what he wrote. When he talks about the African American community that way. However, there are some things that he's written on his Twitter platform that I think that we can find a consensus where we agree on things, but I don't know if he should be fired. I just think he should be penalized. That's all I think. What should happen to Charles Negy? It says here he's also the author of White Shaming, Bullying Based on Prejudice, Virtue Signaling, and Ignorance, which is a book that he wrote that has been available since January 2020. Interesting. Wait, is the noise over? I hope so, because I hope the background noise is over. What are we going to talk about? I think that covers everything for today's episode. I mean, we've spent about an hour and 24 minutes talking about this stuff. But yeah, going back to the pro wrestling, like I said, it's scripted, it's predetermined. There are fixed maneuvers, and there are real maneuvers that do happen in that ring. There are injuries that do happen. We all know that wrestling is also a work and sometimes can be a shoot. Basically, a work is something that is destined to happen, and a shoot is something that's unintentionally not meant to happen. And then you have a worked wrestling match, or a shoot wrestling match. Now, what's the difference between a worked wrestling match and a shoot wrestling match? A shoot wrestling match is based on legitimate wrestling moves. Like, you look at collegiate wrestling, you look at high school wrestling, you look at amateur wrestling, you look at Greco-Roman wrestling, you look at freestyle wrestling. That's shoot wrestling right there. Worked shoot is just the catch aspect of wrestling, because that's what pro wrestling is. It's catch wrestling. But like I said, you could read the articles from Bloody Blue Mars that were published, because I think they give a better, insightful view of pro wrestling. We'll put the links in the description below on YouTube, like we said, and we'll also put it up on our social media platforms for anybody to read it, along with these sources based on the African American community situation that Charles Negy was bringing up to light, along with the Black Lives Matter movement, and along with the crime rates that have been happening under not just the African American community, but every other race. So yeah, I think that will probably conclude today's episode, because we reached about a time limit, an hour and 26 minutes, and I don't know that it'll go through all platforms. So yeah, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter. We're also on SoundCloud. We're on basically other podcast streaming platforms like Stitcher, you name it. Basically, when you go to the Bloody Blue Mars website and click on the podcast section, you will find out that we're on almost all social media platforms and podcast media platforms where you can check us out. We're basically going to be on... Basically, we did make a YouTube account, but we're not going to be posting that much on there, because YouTube's not necessarily a podcast multimedia platform. It's a complex platform where anybody could post things like video content, music, podcasts, you name it. So we won't be posting that much on YouTube, because we focus mostly our podcast on basically social media and podcast streaming platforms. So when you go on the Bloody Blue Mars website, and when you click on podcast, you'll see that we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We do have an RSS feed that's connected to FeedBurner. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Google Play. We're on Apple iTunes. We're on Anchor, which is a Apple app, an iPhone app, or a Google Play app. It's called Anchor, Anchor. We're on Spotify, we're on Podbean, we're on Stitcher, and we're also on Spreaker. So yeah, be sure to follow us and check us out there. When you go on the Bloody Blue Mars website and under the podcast tab. So yeah, today's episode was very informative, don't you think, Chris? Yeah, very informative. I think very lucrative when you talk about these issues. And another thing I wanted to talk about, remember when we were taught in high school that right-wingers are basically for limited government, they're for indoctrination, they're for religion, free markets, and capitalism. And yeah, I remember that. And that the left side of the aisle is more focused on totalitarianism because they're for bigger government, they're for socialism, they're for indoctrination in the educational systems. I mean, I remember learning this stuff in high school, and I find politics and government an interesting subject to talk about. Yeah. And it's also true that left-wingers are also secular, meaning they're away from religion. They hate religion, but they criticize the biggest religion that they criticize the most is definitely Christianity. Like, Christianity is always under scrutiny and under attack by left-wingers. But there are some progressive Christians in those circles as well that you have to keep in mind. That should be aligning with the right, not the left, because of, those secular views that they hold. Yeah, mostly secularism is based on agnosticism or atheism. Yeah, that is true. So yeah, so we covered everything from Charles Negy, UCF, check. We covered everything from Cobra Kai, Karate Kid, check. We covered everything from the video game consoles, check. Logan Paul and Jake Paul, check. And wrestling, check. So yeah, we covered every topic. But yeah, like I said, I think that for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, I think they should make the price really cheap and affordable for everybody. I don't think they should raise it at $600, $700 because it wouldn't be worth buying at the start of, at the start of the winter season when they start releasing the consoles. Like, that would be too expensive. Nobody's going to want to buy it. And people are going to probably complain. I would probably file a complaint to Sony and Microsoft and Xbox and PlayStation for raising the price on their video game consoles to $600 or $700. I would literally file a complaint. I just think they should set the price range around $200 to $300 or $400 like they did with the PS4. Yeah. But yeah, going back also to the Cobra Kai thing, I think it's a great deal that they're going to Netflix. I don't know when Season 3 will be released. Hopefully it should be released by the end of the summer. I'm hoping that it gets released by the end of the summer because usually Cobra Kai releases their seasons between May or April of every year. And it's a fact because they released Season 1, I think, in May. They released Season 2 in May or April. Either of those two seasons. So my question is, why would they want to release Season 3 now at a later time? And I can understand because of the coronavirus and COVID situation. And that's another thing we wanted to talk about. The coronavirus. Oh. Well, we'll get to that later. I mean, I can understand them releasing it and the season 3 for Cobra Kai at a later date because they basically postpone and delay it to a later date because of the coronavirus situation, and I understand that. That's understandable because when did they finish productions for season 3? I think it was before the coronavirus thing became a thing. Yeah, they did. They definitely finished the productions. They were just I think what they're doing is looking for marketing. Yeah, the marketing aspects. So, I think they're looking for the marketing aspects within Netflix. And by the way, I think, like I said, it is great news that they're going to Netflix because I was watching a YouTube video that was posted by Cobra Kai Kid and I think Bonsai Kai Dojo, where they were talking about the big Netflix deal with Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid. I think it's a great deal. But yeah, so far that's pretty much our episode about the Charles Negy UCF situation as well. And the whole white privilege, African American privilege, African privilege, Asian privilege. I mean, if it exists, it exists. But I don't think it exists because honestly, a privilege is something that you earn. It's not something that's easily inheritable or given to you. Yeah. So, for example, voting is a privilege. And education is considered a privilege. A right is not necessarily a privilege, but yeah. But it could be a privilege. It's an honor to have a right. I mean, a right to vote, a right to anything, or things like that. So, a privilege based on skin color, it just sounds awkward. It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I agree. But yeah, that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about today. I mean, I think we're already at 2 hours. No, we streamed this episode for 1 hour and 35 minutes. That's long, so I think we'll just call it a day. But yeah, like I said again about Cobra Kai, about the PS5, Xbox Series X. I think these are awesome news to hear. Yeah. Are the background noises over? Yeah, it's already over. There's no background noises anymore. But yeah, that's about it. I guess that concludes our episode. I guess there's nothing else to say. I mean, be sure, guys, to listen to our podcast. I mean, we're a daily, weekly, or frequently... we haven't posted anything in the podcast since, about 8 months ago. And our first episode was about a year ago. So we haven't been really posting daily or weekly, but I think we will start to change that because we've been posting very frequently and occasionally. I mean, 8 months has been a long time. I mean, we haven't posted since 8 months. I think it was 8 months. So I think we'll be posting from now on more daily or weekly. We're still debating about. I think we're planning on doing it as a weekly show more than daily because, I mean, too much podcasting can be overwhelming and a burden. So, yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up our today's episode. Tune in next week or in a few days after. I mean, depending on how we're going to showcase our podcast. Tune in for the next episode because the next episode is one you don't want to miss. We will be talking about the history of Europe in regards to Islam, the truth about Islam, under Islam, and we're going to be, the history of Europe under Islam, and we're going to be talking about the truth about Islam and how it impacts today's generation, society, and era. So, and it's not going to be politically correct for sure, because we're going to be basing it on facts and truth, and we're going to narrow it down to who has the right answer, because there's both sides of the story. One argues for Islam, and the other one that argues against Islam. So, yeah, that's going to be the next episode. So, yeah, guys, be sure to follow us, like I said, on basically all 3 social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and we're also on pretty much any streaming podcast platform out there, including SoundCloud, Feedburner, Google Play, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spreaker, and Anchor. You name it. We're everywhere. So, yeah. Be sure to check us out. Also on the Bloody Blue Mars website, we're basically being monetized by them, because YouTube's not gonna want to monetize us, because we're, we can be controversial at times, and I think that's probably just unfair on YouTube's part towards us. So, yeah. And there's going to be articles that we're going to be publishing under this episode, so be sure to tune in, and check us out. All right, are there any final words you want to say, Chris? No, we're good. All right. Over and out, guys. Oh, and another thing I would like to say, guys, that I forgot to say in the episode, for today's episode, is that about the Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa, when you put 2 and 2 together, they're both actually funded by George Soros. And I was going to say something, and this brought to my attention, the Black Lives Matter of today, from, I think it was 2014 to 2015 up until 2020, is just, it feels like it's another version of the Black Panthers party movement. Like, it's no different. The Black Lives Matter movement is just as equal to the Black Panthers movement. Now, keep that in mind. And that's what it reminds me of. Now, going back to the Black Lives Matter and Antifa being funded by George Soros, for those who don't know, George Soros is basically a Jewish billionaire who's been, and corporate elitist, who's been funding organizations that have been left-wing, including funding Hillary Clinton to run for office, and supporting the left side of the aisle. And like I said, the left side of the aisle is totalitarian. They want to bring in a one world government that's known as an NW, or New World Order. And trust me, this when I say this, I mean, if that's the case, and if that happens, it's not good, because it's going to lead to socialism, communism, anarchism, because of Antifa, you name it. Trust me, it's not good. I mean, your First Amendment rights are going to be violated, your Second Amendment rights are going to be violated, and any other amendment as well. I mean, it's going to go against the Constitution, so, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, be sure to tune in next week, or maybe in the next few days, it depends, when we release our next episode, because you don't want to miss out on this one. This one's going to be based on the history of the truth and the history of Islam, and how it has impacted Europe in a non-politically correct fashion. And it's not going to be politically incorrect. It's going to be politically incorrect. It's not going to be politically correct, and it's not going to be politicized with, this propaganda narrative that Islam is somehow peaceful and all this. So, yeah, be sure to tune in on that episode. Be sure to check us out on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. And we're basically also on all podcast streaming platforms. We're on Feedburner, SoundCloud, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Podcast, Anchor, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, and Spreaker. So be sure to tune in. We'll be covering a lot of topics. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today's episode. And then we'll also be covering other topics like pro wrestling, more related news and updates in the future, and we'll be talking about other topics as well. I mean, like government, politics, you name it, in the future. So yeah, keep that in mind. And yeah,